The world thinks it already knows Chernobyl. A name that conjures images of radiation, ruins, and a poisoned wasteland beyond redemption. But what if that story is only half true? What if Europe's most contaminated region is now becoming one of the continent's greatest wildernesses? If you were standing in the Chernobyl Exclusion Zone right now, you would notice something strange. There isn't just one kind of time passing here. One clock stopped at 1:23 a.m. on April 26, 1986, and never started again. The clock of humanity, of lives cut short in the middle of their stories. "40 years is long enough for a newborn child to grow up and become a grandparent. Long enough for an entire generation to grow up never knowing Pripyat as a living city, knowing it only as a legend, an image on a screen, a lesson from history. But to this land itself, 40 years is barely a moment." Another clock moves slowly, measured in seasons and decades. The clock of the forests, the wolves, and the animals quietly rewriting the rules on the very land humanity abandoned. A third clock runs on a scale of time the human mind can barely comprehend. Tens of thousands of years. This is the clock of radiation, still quietly ticking beneath a mass of molten material known as the elephant's foot. And most recently, a fourth clock suddenly appeared, moving at a breathless pace, measured in hours, the clock of war. 4 clocks, 4 completely different speeds of time, all ticking together across the same 2,600 square kilometer stretch of land in northern Ukraine. This is not a story about a disaster that happened and ended. This is the story of a place where time does not move in just one direction. In the village of Zalesye, one of more than 100 villages that were evacuated, residents were told they had only 2 hours to pack their belongings, and that they would be back in 3 days. But no one ever returned. In one kitchen, 4 plates still sit neatly arranged on the table, a meal that was never served. The knives and forks have rusted, and the tablecloth has fused to the wooden surface. But the arrangement remains untouched. 4 chairs, with just enough space for a family. Satellite imagery shows that the built-up area of Zalesye has shrunk by more than 60% since 1986, as if the forest were slowly swallowing the village, one fence at a time. The human clock stopped in an entire city, too. Pripyat was built in 1970 as a model of the ideal Soviet city. 16 16-story apartment buildings, a cultural center, 3 swimming pools, and more than 30 shops and restaurants. At the time of the evacuation, the city had 49,360 residents, with an average age of just 26. The evacuation began at 2 p.m. on April 27th, 36 hours after the explosion. More than 1,100 buses lined the streets, and residents were allowed to bring only their documents, 3 days' worth of food, and 1 change of clothes. At the time, officials assured everyone this is only a temporary measure. This is an amusement park, originally set to open on May 1st, 1986, just 5 days after the explosion, and it never welcomed a single visitor. Today, its yellow Ferris wheel has become the global image most associated with the disaster. In school number 3, thousands of gas masks still lie scattered across the hallways. In one classroom, a child's shoe, too small for anyone over the age of 6, has remained on the windowsill since 1986, and, of course, no one has ever touched it. In the music room, a piano still leans against the wall, its keys yellowed and warped. Over the years, a few visitors have tried pressing a note or two, and the piano, though out of tune, still rings out through the empty building with an almost cruel clarity amid all that silence. It still answers, even here, even now, when someone reaches out and touches it. On the grasslands south of the town of Chernobyl, Przewalski's horses, the last truly wild horse species left on Earth, graze in herds of more than 30. Stocky bodies, upright black manes, faint zebra-like striping on their legs, traces of ancestors that once galloped across the Eurasian steppe before human civilization even existed. They were never supposed to be here. In 1998, a small group was released as a rewilding experiment based on a simple logic. If this land was too contaminated for humans, perhaps it could become a refuge for a species on the brink of extinction. Fewer than 2,000 Przewalski's horses remain worldwide today. Yet more than 150 of them now live in the shadow of the worst nuclear disaster in human history. West of the town, the Red Forest once absorbed the heaviest dose of radiation from the explosion. Within weeks, the entire pine forest died off and was buried under clean sand on Soviet orders. But the forest came back, not the old pines, but birch and willow, hardier species, pushing straight up through the very burial mounds. Geiger counters still spike if you step off the marked path, but the canopy still closes overhead, as if nothing had ever happened. Gray wolves have returned to the exclusion zone at densities 7 times higher than comparable non-irradiated reserves nearby. They hunt in packs of 6 to 12. Some tracked individuals have even traveled more than 300 kilometers beyond the zone's boundary, carrying slightly elevated radiation levels out into the wider European ecosystem. At night, their howls echo through the empty streets of Pripyat, a sound not heard in this region since before industrialization. European bison, the largest land mammal on the continent, were reintroduced to the exclusion zone starting in 2014. Their ancestors once roamed these same forests alongside woolly mammoths. By the mid-20th century, the species had been hunted to near extinction, with fewer than 50 individuals surviving. Now a herd of more than 30 roams freely across the zone. According to scientific reports, cesium-137 levels in their muscle tissue are elevated, but no clear impact on their health or reproduction has been documented. Overhead, a white-tailed eagle, wingspan exceeding 2 meters, lifts off from the reeds along the Pripyat River every morning. This species was once pushed out of most of Western Europe by pesticides and habitat loss. Here, it has found what it can't find anywhere else: space, silence, and a river full of fish that no one fishes anymore. In total, more than 230 bird species have been recorded here, a level of biodiversity matching some of Europe's oldest nature reserves, not designed by any conservation body, simply the result of humans leaving. Even the water here keeps its own clock. The cooling pond, spanning more than 22 square kilometers south of the reactor complex, was once home to giant catfish over 2 meters long, left unfished for decades. In 2014, the pond was partially drained, and most of the fish disappeared, but the remaining wetlands have since become a haven for dozens of rare bird species. Rising above the treetops, like the skeleton of a forgotten civilization, stands the Duga radar, a massive steel lattice structure, nearly 700 meters long and 150 meters tall, once one of the most closely guarded military secrets in the Soviet Union, so secret that for years it officially didn't exist. Built in the late 1970s as part of a ballistic missile early warning system, designed to detect incoming nuclear warheads by bouncing radar signals off the ionosphere, its strange rhythmic bursts once jammed radio signals across the globe. From Tokyo to Toronto, amateur radio operators everywhere could pick it up, and it earned the nickname the Russian woodpecker. Several governments filed formal complaints, and countless conspiracy theories flourished, and through it all, the Soviet Union never said a word. Few people know Duga had a twin installation in eastern Siberia, but that one was dismantled and sold for scrap in the 1990s. Only the Chernobyl installation survives fully intact, ironically protected by the very radiation that keeps scrap dealers from ever setting foot near it. Not far away, the Jupiter factory stands as the ruin of a complex that once manufactured electronic components for the Soviet military, employing more than 3,500 workers, its true purpose once classified top secret. Today, thousands of circuit boards litter the floor like metal scales. In the locker room, employee names are still taped to the lockers. The calendar on the manager's office wall also stopped in April 1986, the same moment the entire region froze in time. Further north, Yaniv train station sits in an empty stretch of land, its tracks buried under weeds and rusted rail cars, once the main railway line for Pripyat, carrying more than 50,000 passenger trips a year. Today, wildflowers grow between the rails, and a red fox has been spotted denning beneath one of the rail cars, raising her pups in a place once built to move thousands of people a day. The Azure swimming pool is a strange exception on the machine's clock. It stayed operational until 1998, more than 12 years after the disaster, serving the very workers who maintained the reactor. Today, the pool sits empty, its turquoise tiles still visible beneath a layer of dust. One of the few places where you can picture what Pripyat was meant to look like, not in ruin, but in operation. The energetic Palace of Culture was once the cultural heart of Pripyat, a 5,000-seat auditorium where the red velvet curtain has now rotted into a pile of fabric and dust. But on the walls of the main lobby, Soviet-era mosaics still glow with startling color. Images of workers and athletes pieced together from thousands of tiny glass tiles, untouched by either radiation or time. And atop the highest point in the city, the 16-story Policia Hotel once served as the command center for emergency responders in the disaster's earliest days, where officials tracked helicopters dropping sand and boron onto the burning reactor. Today, its hallways are dark and hazardous, but the rooftop still offers the exact same view it always has: the reactor's silver containment dome, and the endless green of a forest that has swallowed everything between here and the horizon. At 1:23 a.m. on April 26, 1986, a safety test at reactor number 4 turned into a catastrophe. One explosion hurled the reactor's 1,000-ton lid into the air like a coin. A second explosion tore the building apart, exposing the reactor core to the open sky. Over the next 10 days, the fire burned through 190 tons of nuclear fuel, releasing more radiation than the atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki combined. The radioactive cloud reached Scandinavia within 48 hours. To this day, it remains the only nuclear disaster ever classified at the highest severity level, Level 7, with only one other disaster ever reaching that same level: Fukushima, 25 years later. The first containment structure, known as the sarcophagus, was built in just 206 days. It was never meant to last forever. By the early 2000s, it had already begun to crack. It took more than 2 decades to design, fund, and build its replacement, the new safe confinement. A structure 108 meters tall, 162 meters long, and 257 meters wide, slid into place in November 2016. It remains the largest movable land-based structure ever built by humans, weighing over 36,000 tons, heavier than 3 Eiffel Towers combined. Sliding the entire arch 327 meters into position took 2 days and more than 200 hydraulic jacks. Engineers at the time described it with a line that's since become legendary, like pushing a cathedral on roller skates. Beneath it all, a man-made lava mass, a fused mixture of molten nuclear fuel, concrete, and steel, remains extremely hazardous and will stay that way for millennia to come. Scientists nicknamed it the elephant's foot. Ironically, the new confinement structure was designed to last 100 years, but the core beneath it will keep radiating heat for roughly another 20,000 years before it truly cools. And even here, life has found its own way forward. A remarkable fungus, Cladosporium sphaerospermum, was discovered growing on the interior walls of the old sarcophagus itself. Rich in melanin, it appears to use radiation as an energy source, in a way not unlike how plants use sunlight. Scientists are now studying this fungus for potential applications in space travel, a kind of biological shield, born out of the most hostile environment on the planet. For nearly 40 years, those four clocks, human, ecological, forgotten machinery, and radiation, coexisted in a strange but stable balance. Then, in 2022, a fifth clock suddenly appeared, and it began running faster than all the others combined. On February 24th, 2022, Russian forces seized the Chernobyl power plant within the very first hours of the full-scale invasion. Plant staff were held hostage for weeks. The first rotation of workers arrived only after nearly 600 straight hours on duty. Most alarming of all, soldiers dug trenches straight through the red forest without any protective gear, stirring up radioactive dust that had lain undisturbed for almost 40 years. Three years later, that clock of war still hasn't slowed down. On February 14, 2025, a Russian drone struck the roof of the new safe confinement, the first direct attack ever recorded on a major nuclear containment structure anywhere in the world. By December 5, 2025, the IAEA officially confirmed that the structure had lost its core safety functions, including its ability to prevent radioactive leaks. Plant director Sergei Tarakanov said repairs could take another 3 to 4 years, at an estimated cost of at least 500 million euros, with a completion deadline set before 2030. Even now, an attack on a nearby substation in October 2025 knocked out power to the entire area for more than 3 hours, forcing the new safe confinement to run on backup generators, a reminder that even the slow, millennia-long clock of radiation depends on a power grid that can be severed in a matter of hours. This clock is fundamentally different from the other three. It's the only one humans can still intervene in, slow down, or accidentally speed up. The wolves don't care who controls the border, but that massive silver dome, the one shielding all of Europe from a clock that counts in tens of thousands of years, depends entirely on decisions made in a matter of hours or days. There's a small group, only around 100 people, living in the exclusion zone who don't seem to belong to any of these clocks at all. They measure time by the seasons. The Samosli, self-settlers, most of them women, in their 70s, 80s, and 90s, defied the evacuation order to return to the villages where they were born. At their peak, there were more than 1,000 of them. Today, fewer than 100 remain. They grow vegetables, raise chickens and goats, and draw water from wells tested for radiation twice a year. In a land defined by decay, the Samosli are the one force pushing back against it, maintaining, repairing, keeping the forest at bay, one fence post at a time. When asked about radiation, they simply shrug and say, "We survived war, we survived famine, and we can survive this too," referring to World War II, which claimed more than 8 million Ukrainian lives, and the Holodomor famine of 1932 to 1933.
Перше, і здоров'я тобі, і жінці, і тому чоловіку, що його прив'язано, і той жінці, всім здоров'ячка.
Scientists studying this group have found that their health, in many cases, is no worse than that of people who were relocated to cities. Perhaps the stress of losing one's home, one's community, one's sense of purpose does just as much damage as radiation itself. Their mothers are buried here, and storks still return to nest on their chimneys every spring. They are the last residents of a world the rest of humanity has abandoned, not out of defiance, but for something older than politics or physics, a sense of belonging. If you ask Chernobyl what time it is right now, the most honest answer would be, it depends where you're standing and which clock you're listening to.
Don't get ill, the most important is your health.
In a kitchen in Zalesiye, it is forever, always, April 1986. In the forest, this spring is turning into summer, just as it has for 40 cycles before it. Beneath the silver dome, only a few more hours have just ticked by on a 20,000-year journey. And at a substation not far away, a power outage lasting just a few minutes could decide whether one of these clocks keeps ticking in rhythm or suddenly lurches forward in a way no one wants. Perhaps that's what makes Chernobyl unlike anywhere else on Earth. It isn't a place frozen in the past, nor a closed chapter waiting for people to learn its lesson and move on. It's the one place where you can stand in a single spot and feel several entirely different timelines passing beneath your feet all at once. A frozen past, a thriving present, a distant future quietly simmering, and a new emergency that has just cut its way into all of it. So what about you? How many clocks are running in parallel in your own life, right now? Is there something in your life that stopped on one specific day and you've never truly let it move forward again? And is there something else, quietly, slowly, still growing, even when you're not paying attention?
Takich moich dzieci. Це та, що приїжджає, це вже Калунщина, каже, це наша матка. Ой, приїде теж двоє внутрення, троє внутрення. Вона радіо.
Leave your answer in the comments below. And if you'd like to keep exploring places where time doesn't move in just one direction, don't forget to subscribe so we can continue this journey together.